Luke, welcome to the show. Thanks so much, man, for taking the time to sit down and speak with me. You are something like a legend in the ESR world. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but man, over 1,000 podcast episodes, uh, over 100 million downloads or something like that. You've been at it for well over 10 years, man. Does this type of stuff, you think about it? I mean, how does it feel to know that all these people are listening to and enjoying your show?
Well, yeah, that's a very strange feeling to have you say that. Because obviously I'm aware that I've done all the episodes and all that stuff, and I've been going for quite a long time. But yeah, I just it doesn't really impact on me that much directly every day because I'm just out. I live in Paris. Not that that's anything to do with it, but I just sort of walk around. People sort of bump into me. No one cares. It's just. I don't really see it much evidence of it. And then every now and then I'll meet a student, a learner of English. And, sometimes they don't realize at the beginning, this happens to me quite a lot. I'll just maybe at the end of an episode, at the end of a lesson, because I still teach in classrooms as well. At the end of a lesson, I'll sort of say, oh, by the way, I've got a podcast. You might want to check it out. There's an episode on the topic that we talked about today. Here it is. And I'll show it to them. And there'll be one person in the class who goes, wait, that's you? Or someone else will say, oh, you've got like all these subscribers on YouTube and wow, you've got 100 million downloads. Wow, you're famous. And I kind of go, nah, I'm not. I'm really not. So it's very weird, because my audiences are dispersed all around the world. It's not like they're all, I'm well known in one particular place. Instead, It's just very kind of spread out, my audience. So it's rare that I kind of have experiences of that a famous person might have at all. Every now and then, maybe I'll do a live show or something and I'll advertise it on the podcast and I'll ask people to come down. And then, of course, people do come. And at the end, they'll actually form an orderly queue to kind of like say hello to me and stuff. And that's always very strange. So
I imagine.
I've got the best of both worlds because I've just got the complete anonymity. And at the same time, I do have an audience who will listen to things I have to say. So I'm very happy with that balance.
I imagine it's better that way too, right? Because you get to just live a normal life. You're not constantly bombarded by people trying to stop you and get your time and all that type of stuff. But
yeah,
like you said, it is great to have an audience. But if I'm not mistaken, you started teaching English years before you started the podcast. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So what got you into teaching English? Because I was reading about you and you studied media and cultural studies at university. So how'd you go from that to teaching English as a foreign language?
I don't know if there was much rhyme or reason involved. It was more that after university, I didn't know what to do with my life, which, we all know what that feels like, I think. It's a very common experience. So I finished my degree and I was kind of lost, really. I didn't know what to do with myself. And it was not a good time. I felt sort of, sort of lost and directionless and purposelessness. Purposeless. Purposeless. There you go. Yeah. I'm an English teacher. You wouldn't have realized. Purposeless and all this, all those bad things. I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, put it in perspective, but it wasn't great. And for a couple of years, I was kind of like, trying to work out what I was going to do. And so, doing media and cultural studies, it's a great degree, but it's not one of those vocational degrees that puts you into a job afterwards. It's more like, okay, you can now sort of analyze everything. Good luck in the world. I just ended up analyzing everything all the time and I couldn't do anything. And I mean, a lot of people who do degrees like that, they end up working in the media in some way. And I gave that a shot, but it didn't work for me because my dad had worked for the BBC. He had a great career at the BBC as a broadcaster and journalist and stuff. And he, it was like he went to Oxford University. He had a fantastic he did really well at Oxford, then went on to have a really great career at the BBC. It was just, a lot of achievement. So I think maybe for my brother and me, there was a bit of pressure there to kind of, do something similar. And yet I arrived at university feeling like I had no tools at all. And I felt even, anyway, I just didn't have the confidence and stuff like that. So I didn't know what to do with myself. And in the end, I decided that I needed to, sort of do something else and sort of travel. I remember I did some work experience at a place at a broadcasting media company in London, and it didn't really appeal to me that much. But the woman at the end was kind enough to sit down with me and sort of say, what's up? What are you going to do with, can I give you any advice? And, I was like saying, I just don't know what to do. And I'm not sure if this is for me. And she said, look, what you should do is just have some experiences and, consider traveling. And I thought, yeah, all right. Finally, someone actually kind of gave me the license to actually go and have an experience that I could enjoy, Instead, I felt like I had to just focus on my career. But she said, no, just take time for yourself and, travel and have experiences. And at a similar period, another friend of mine had told me about a friend of his who was an English teacher. And he sold it to me in really, really well. He sold it very well. He said, oh, it's brilliant. He lives in Barcelona. He teaches in the morning and then he goes to the beach in the afternoon. So I thought, this is for me. And so I combined those two things of like, go and travel and have experiences. And here's a potential career that you could maybe do. And so I trained up to be a teacher and did the CELTA, which is the one that we do over in the UK, the Certificate in English Language Teaching to Adults. Did that and applied for various jobs in various places. And there were lots of jobs in Japan. So I went off and started teaching in Japan. So that was my first job. I spent 2 years living over there, my first teaching experience. And it actually gave me some confidence, which I was able to kind of build on. And I continued teaching. Yes.
Wow, man. So this was 2009 you started teaching.
No, that was when I started the podcast. So I started teaching in 2001.
2000,
so
damn, man.
I'm quite old.
That was quite a while ago, my friend. But
were you even born?
I was 6 years old when you started teaching English. Yeah, I was a little baby learning to speak English. But I'm curious to know about your dad, because you said he went to Oxford, had this great career in broadcasting. Did you guys ever have conversations? Was he kind of expecting you to maybe go down the same path, or did you guys talk about following in his footsteps, or what was that like?
I don't know. I don't know if there were any specific conversations. It was always, my parents are lovely, and they would never be like, right now, this is what we expect you to do. Okay. And if you don't, then you get out of this house. It wasn't that kind of thing. But there was just like sort of unconscious expectation maybe, or just little things like that. My dad would say, you could do anything. You could be a lawyer. He'd say you could do anything. And then the things he would name would be like quite sort of difficult things to do. So it's like, okay, so I can do anything, but only these things. And I was into music and stuff at university, and after university, I was playing in a lot of bands and, doing it quite seriously. And I remember once he kind of gave me some advice. He said, look, the music thing's good and everything, but I don't know if that's what you should be focusing your energy on in your career. And I already kind of thought of that anyway, because working in the music industry is, being a musician, it's not necessarily a very secure kind of job. And so I don't know that he never explicitly said, you should follow in my footsteps. It wasn't a kind of Star Wars sort of situation of like, join me and we'll broadcast to the galaxy as father and son. Instead, it was more just like subtle suggestions and things that made me think that I should probably do something at a similar level that he did,
But what did you like about broadcasting? Because you gave it a try, but you just said it wasn't for you.
Don't know. I thought it was interesting. I mean, growing up at home, I'd observed my dad sort of talking about the news, and it was. He would sometimes, we would always watch the news, and he would comment on the way it was done. And so I picked up just that sense of something about how shows were made and things like that. And he would talk about the newsreaders and sort of critique them, kind of thing. And also he made other shows. He didn't just make the news, but when he worked at the BBC in the Midlands, like regional television, he made some kind of current affairs shows and other programs. And so just sort of grew up in this household where we would look at broadcasting and consider it. And so I was just in that world, just kind of grew up in that kind of mindset. And I thought it was interesting. But media and cultural studies, I mean, I think I took that degree. I didn't have that much choice because I screwed up my A-levels. I don't know if you know what A-levels are.
No, what are A-levels?
So in the UK, you take, when you finish school at 16, you take GCSEs. These are your kind of end of school exams, your finals. And then you can either leave school and go off and get a job, or you go on to the next level of education, which is college, and you take A-levels. And you tend to take A-levels when you're about 18 years old. So I don't know what the equivalent is in the States for that.
At 18 at university?
18 is before university. So that would be like your pre-university qualifications.
Really? Here, like we go to high school till about 18, graduate, and then right off to school, 18, you're starting college doing undergrad studies. So,
right, okay. So for us, there's one at 16, and then you can choose to go further and do what you would call high school, and you graduate from high school. That's A-levels. And then you can go to university based on your A-level results.
Interesting.
So I did A-levels, and I completely ruined that. I completely screwed it up in a big way.
You say that, you mean like you were failing all your classes, or what do you mean you screwed it up?
I got terrible results. I failed spectacularly, so well that I'm kind of proud of it. I mean, you can fail, and then you can got the results I did, where it's like, if you're going to fail, you might as well really fail well, But
it wasn't intentional, right? You weren't trying to fail. It was just bad.
Absolutely not intentional. I was just distracted by lots of other things, by music and hanging around with my friends and things like that.
Typical teenager stuff.
Just typical teenager stuff. Spent a lot of the college, the sixth form college where you go to do your A-levels, was next to a park, and I spent more time in the park than I did at the college.
Yeah.
And it was a kind of education. At school, I'd sort of kept my head down, got fairly, got above average exam results at school, but I led a very boring school life up till the age of about 16. I was just interested in sport. I just played football every evening at the weekend, soccer. And then when I got to 16, I sort of like the world kind of opened up in a different way. When I left school and we had to wear uniforms at school, which is normal in the UK. So, like I didn't have to wear a uniform every day. I could suddenly start to express myself with the clothes I was wearing, started to get into music, and just kind of, the world opened up a bit. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. And I just took my eye off the education side of things, and I wasn't focusing on my studies. A-levels are really hard. You've got to really work hard, and you've got to be very academic to do well. And I just wasn't being very academic at that time. And so as a result, really flunked, as you would say in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to then go back and do more A-levels in a year. A lot of my friends passed their A-levels and went off to university. I had to kind of stay back a year and do new ones, and it was depressing. Yeah. And so anyway, I had to do some new ones, and then I didn't get the greatest A-level results. Your A-levels determine which universities you can then apply to, right? It's probably the similar situation.
More or less the same, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of three levels of university in the UK. You've got the Oxbridge ones, Oxford and Cambridge, the very best. Mm-hmm. And then underneath that, there's the red brick universities, the well-established ones in different parts of the country, like Manchester or, other places. And then below that, there are ex-polytechnic universities, which are the newer universities. They don't have such a good reputation. It's easier to get into them. You can get your degree from them, but they're not necessarily like, I see you went to, this, college. It's not really that. It's more like, okay, you got a degree from this college. Oh, all right. Right. So I went to one of those universities, and they didn't have I didn't basically have the choice of like, I will choose this specific thing. Instead, it was like, am I going to do this thing that I'm not sure about, or this thing I'm not sure about? So I did the media and cultural studies, which actually was very interesting, but not that useful, not the sort of thing that's going to open all the doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you felt like you just had to go to university at the time? Was there no other option, maybe to start working or do something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah, no, that was never really a consideration. No. No, the idea that I could have gone off and just I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't gone
Mm,
to university. That was just definitely the path that was expected. And if I'd had, I don't know, if I'd been an entrepreneur at 16 or something, or at
mhm.
18, if I'd, been a business person and it was obvious that I was just like waiting to just get out into the market and start, doing deals and making money, then sure. But that was not the case at all. I mean, I was still a
Mm.
kid, really, you know.
Yeah, yeah, 16. I imagine that's the reason most kids go to university. That's why I went to university. It's almost just like, well, what if I don't do this? What am I gonna do? So I went to school just thinking at least I'll have 4 more years to figure out what I want to do because I knew I didn't want to go to school. I just didn't see any reason to be there. I wasn't interested in any of the degrees they were offering, and I was just like, man, I want to do something creative and I don't want to put on a suit and tie and go punch a clock every day. So that was
Yeah.
really the only reason I went to school because my parents went to school and I think maybe at like 16 or 17, they started asking, so where you going to go? What you thinking about? I'm like, I don't fucking know, man. I don't even want to go to school, but you just kind of do it because you feel like you have to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah, that's right. What did you
yeah,
do in the end?
I did 2 years at like a community college in San Diego. I thought I was going to study business administration, which is like in the US, that's translating. I would say that's just like I'm just going to study the most basic thing to get a degree and then figure it out from there. Everybody who doesn't know what they want to do, I'm studying business administration just because guess it sounds good. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did 2 years there. And then at some point, I was just going to school every day, just working a part time job. And I realized, like, man, I'm not enjoying any of this shit. I just feel like I'm wasting my time in my life. And like kind of like you said, it was a little bit later for me, but I started learning Spanish. And that's when the world really started to open up for me. And I realized there's a whole planet out there and people are doing all types of stuff. And when I learned this new language, there are hundreds of millions of people I can talk to now. So you're exchanging different kinds of ideas, learning more about different cultures. And I was like, man, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm going to travel for a little bit. I'm just going to save up as much money as I can and just go somewhere and see what happens. So at 20 years old, I dropped out and went to Mexico for like 6 weeks. And I was like, yeah, this was the right decision. I was just wasting my time in school. Even today, I look back and I'm like, I should have never went to college. I guess it was good because I didn't know what I wanted to do either at 18 years old. But those 2 years, man, were just like a waste of time. They
It's
really were.
hard though, isn't it, at that
Yeah.
age? Because there is a lot of pressure
Yeah.
because you're going to think what I do now is going to be so important for me later on. And if I just follow my some whimsical idea of like I'm just going to go to Mexico and just kind of travel around and meet
Yeah.
people and learn Spanish and stuff, that's what you want to do. That's what your heart's telling you to do, but your mind's kind of going, you can't do that. That's no way to build your future. You know what you can.
Right.
So it's a pretty frightening. It's a very frightening time. I mean, I look back on those times when my whole life, my adult life was ahead of me, and yeah, I'm not surprised. I had a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't feel very good about myself, and yeah, it's a very difficult time, especially. I mean, again, if I compare me and my dad, I feel like the world was a completely different place when I was 21 compared to when he was 21,
Yeah.
especially after he went to Oxford University. I felt like for him, it was just all the doors were open and he
Mhm.
just could have chosen, I'll have a fantastic career in advertising or I'll have a fantastic career in broadcasting or something else. And for me, it was more like, God, how can I just,
Pay rent, you know what I mean? Just
yeah,
make enough to pay rent to start, you know?
how can I just pay the rent and also, um, yeah, have like a sense of self-esteem about what I'm doing. And yeah, tricky stuff. But
It is tricky. Yeah. I think,
mm,
what I didn't realize at 18, 19, or 20 years old was like, you're still a baby at this age, man. You have your whole life ahead of you. And yeah, of course, it's important to lay a foundation to start investing and things like that if you want to grow over time. But you have so much more time than you think you do to kind of just experiment, try different things and figure it out. And even if you say, I'm going to do this, you're 21 years old and you say, for the next 10 years, I'm going to dedicate myself to this, you might change your mind, man. It might be 3 or 4 years in, you're like, I don't even like this shit. And you you go in a completely different direction. You're doing something you never imagined even possible. So I would say to a lot of young people, whenever I get a chance to talk to them, I'm like, man, just take some pressure off yourself and just give yourself the freedom to just experiment, talk to different people, like learn about different professions, see what's possible first. Because the more you know about what's actually possible, the more you believe you could maybe end up doing something that you actually enjoy doing instead of just the default options that everybody says are available to you. I think that's something that I really wish I would have known around 18 or 20, because I probably would have taken a lot more risks knowing that I still have time to recover and that you never truly know what you're doing. We're all making this shit up as we go along to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also confidence, right? I mean, when I was 21, I didn't have any confidence
Yeah,
at all. And I think maybe the reason I didn't have that much confidence was because I hadn't really done much. You gain confidence by pushing your own boundaries and by failing and trying again and having experiences and succeeding in certain things. Like those moments of success that you have really give you a boost, and they really empower you, and so when I was 21, I hadn't done anything. I'd just done what I was expected to do. I felt probably a bit of guilt, sort of middle class English guilt as well, in the sense that like my parents would help me out with money. They sort of paid my rent at university and stuff like that. Not that it was very expensive rent, because I lived in a very poor part of Liverpool. But still, I was getting support from my parents. I lived at my parents' house again after I'd been to university. I came back and lived with them. So, I was getting all this kind of help, but it sort of didn't help my confidence, because I just felt ashamed of myself, really, And it wasn't until I actually did something on my own. I had to go to the other side of the world to actually sort of find a place where I could build my own confidence. I had to, for some reason, I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't plan. I was like, I will go to Japan and I will sort of become confident.
Right.
It was more just like, all right, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to go to this place and have some work experience and life experience. And I didn't really realize what would happen. But as a result of doing what was actually quite a scary thing, and working every day, working in a job that I felt was intellectually stimulating and could get some results, and having some success in that just gave me a lot of confidence and social confidence as well. Because being a teacher, it's all about communication and about using your own communication skills. And Japan is a nice place to go to build your confidence, because they're very welcoming, and people will say, Japanese people will say, "Oh, you're brilliant." You're not even that brilliant, but they're just impressed to meet you. So it's quite a good place to build up your self-esteem. Confidence, comes from failing and trying and succeeding and experience. So yeah.
100%. Yeah. How old were you when you taught your first English class?
That would have been 2001. I was 24.
Okay. So before that time, pretty much, you're from 16 to, let's say, 24. You're kind of maybe feeling like, could I say, a loser? Like you maybe hadn't really done much and you didn't have much confidence. You didn't know what you were doing with yourself. And your dad is this, rock star figure. He went to Oxford. He's got a successful broadcasting career. And you're like, man, what the fuck am I doing with myself? Right?
That wasn't until that feeling didn't start to come to me until I'd had that sort of academic failure, when I'd failed my A levels. I felt super cool. Like I thought I was a super cool rock star when I was 17, 18. I thought I was the coolest guy. Because I was playing in bands and I was hanging around with all the cool people and, and stuff like that, kind of being popular with girls and things. And I thought I was cooler than my dad. Yeah. I mean, Dad worked very hard. He was kind of like a workaholic. I mean, now I'm a lot more mature and I can, I can see what's going on, it's not all about like, holding up my dad as some kind of super cool person and all the rest of it. It's just, he's just a person living his life, and me too. We all have our own path. But so I thought I was super cool and everything until I failed my A levels. and everything kind of came crashing down a bit. And then I started feeling really bad about myself and like, oh God. And then, then when real life kind of really kicked in, that's when I started to maybe feel more ashamed of myself and feel a bit low.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What did you do you remember what exactly you did to kind of deal with those feelings of shame and embarrassment and stuff like that? Because when you're especially a young man, you feel like you're supposed to have your stuff together. You're supposed to be progressing and growing in terms of your finance, your ability, your skills and stuff like that. So do you remember what you did during those moments? How did you deal with those negative emotions?
So I don't think at the time that I really understood the emotions and stuff I was feeling. I just had a lot of anxiety and a lot of sort of just general. I wasn't that emotionally literate to be able to understand. Okay, I've got low self-esteem because I'm not. I don't feel like I'm in control of my life. I wasn't really aware necessarily. Instead, I just felt awkward and I felt a lack of control over my own sort of life in a sense. I don't know, Matt. I don't know if this is like a cultural difference in the United States. There's a lot more individual empowerment and stuff, and in the UK, I sort of imagine me in this sort of system, this class system as well in the UK, where you kind of fit into your social class, and I'm definitely middle class, and so there's probably a sense of maybe I felt a bit like a passenger in this kind of system where it's like, okay, you do your studies, you go to university, you get a degree in an interesting subject, and then you get an interesting job and you do really well in it. It's kind of the kind of path.
Yeah.
And I felt like, well, I'm just going to do this, but I didn't necessarily see the link between how I really felt and the things that I really cared about and achieving that. They like seemed to be two separate tracks. The things I was interested in were kind of apparently on a different track to the one that I needed to be on to achieve all of that. So, it's more like I couldn't really work out what the problem was. I couldn't really visualize it or communicate it. I just didn't feel right, and I felt just conflicted. And I a lot of the time I just felt like, oh, damn, what am I doing? And I knew that I had to work on career stuff, but just my motivation was to work on these other things I was more interested in. Today, I just feel so lucky because doing my podcast is this other thing, the thing that I was interested in years ago, really. And it's, maybe it's a bit self-indulgent in the sense that I can just sort of focus my time and energy on kind of things that are just interesting to me. When I was younger, it was stuff like making compilation tapes and things, right?
Compilations of what? You mean like music or?
Yeah, music. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call them mixtapes. If I was confused, call them mixtapes.
Yeah, mixtapes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mixtapes. Yeah, compilation tapes, mixtapes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was very good at that. And I had like books and books and books full of lists of track listings, with lots of arrows and where I crossed out, no, I'll put this track here. And, I slaved over it. And I should have been studying, but I was studying the art of the compilation tape instead. I made some pretty good tapes. And I feel like doing a podcast is a bit more like that in a way, except it's not music. It's actually me talking. I don't know.
It's funny you say that. I feel the same exact way. When I was doing the Life in English podcast consistently, it kind of felt like that. I mean, my story's similar in the sense that I started teaching English unexpectedly. It wasn't ever something I imagined I would be doing. Sometimes I still can't believe I did it. And then I started the podcast just to give my students more listening material because like, people in foreign countries, they don't have much opportunity to speak with real people. And of course there's content online, but if they're already connected to me, why not just listen to my podcast? So I started it and I didn't have any friends where I lived. I didn't have anybody to interview like I'm doing now. So I was like, man, what am I going to talk about? I'll just talk about stuff I find interesting. So it's music and culture and history. And I'm taking clips of other people's content and explaining it and stuff like that. So I felt much more like a curator. Like, here's all this interesting content that people have no idea even exists. Let me just let it shine on my podcast. And I think people really appreciate that. And I never thought of it too much as that part of it. I never thought of it as self-indulgent, but I always kind of felt like at least in the beginning, it's just me on a microphone just talking. Who in the world is gonna listen to this shit? Like, I'm not that interesting, man. So that's when I stopped. Like, in the beginning, I would just ramble. I'd pick a subject and start talking about it. And I realized, like, man, this shit is boring. Like, even I wouldn't listen to myself just ramble for an hour about nothing. So then I would start writing episodes to make them much shorter and more concise. And that's when I really found my sweet spot, because I'm much better at expressing myself writing than I am just speaking off the cuff. So I would write an episode about something interesting and then just read it. And people would have no idea that I'm just reading something, you know what I mean? So it's still a nice listening experience. So that was kind of how I got into podcasting. And to be honest, man, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's almost like therapeutic in a sense, because you get to kind of like explore your thoughts and ideas and kind of put them on wax, so to speak. You know, you record them and share them with people. And by the end of it, like, I don't even know how to explain it. You feel like you've not got something off your chest, but now I know what I think about this thing. And I've hopefully been able to take the listener on some kind of journey with me. And it's just one of the most fun things in the world, man. I just love podcasting.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is something cathartic about it, something therapeutic about it. I mean, you know, there's talking therapy, you know, which is sort of a vague way of referring to types of therapy that involve, you know, talking. And, you know, that's a recognized thing that, you know, by talking and sort of expressing yourself and all those thoughts and ideas that are jumbled up and packed into your head, you know, you get them out. That is actually therapeutic. So yeah, it's definitely therapeutic. And I find that when I go for periods, when I have periods when I can't do the show, or periods when I haven't done what I call a rambling episode, and I do those every now and then, where I'll just basically say I switch on the microphone, start recording, and say, okay, so here are the rules. I have to talk now for an hour, and I have to try and make this coherent. And I'm not allowed to edit. I'm not allowed to start again. Right, here we go. And sort of doing that, you bring the listeners in to it. So, you know, that's quite compelling. But also that's a great thing where I can just, like, all those ideas that have been building up, I can just kind of get them out. Yeah, definitely therapeutic. And when I can't do that, when I go for periods when I can't do that, I start to get a bit frustrated. I'm kind of like, you know, these ideas come to me and I'm like, I've got to get these. I've got to, like, chat GPT. I've got to talk about chat GPT, or like, the World Cup. Yeah, I've got to say some things about the World Cup. You know, things happen. And if I don't get to talk about them, I get a little bit frustrated. So yeah. And I also find the podcast is a great way to just, like, you know, combine a lot of the things, like the university course that I did, which is a lot of that is about, you know, talking about cultural things or analyzing stuff, as I said before. And it's also a vocation for me now. It's a career because, you know, I'm kind of making some money from this. And it's sort of combined everything, really. It's great. It's also comedy because, you know, I can kind of be humorous in the episodes. So it's just, you know, I'm very happy with it because I'm able to do all the things I want to do, and it's kind of tied everything together quite neatly. And I don't have to leave the house, which is quite nice. I can just stay in my room and do it all from here.
Yeah, it is great, man. I feel the same way. I remember when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. The first thing I wanted to be was an actor. And then after that, I wanted to be a rapper, and then a music producer, and then a photographer. So I always knew I wanted to do something creative, and I wanted to make content, even though we didn't call it content back then. I just wanted to create stuff. And so fast forward like 10, 15 years, I found the podcast. And kind of like you just said, you get to kind of bring together really whatever you want. That's the best thing about podcasting is there's no rules, man. You can, whatever comes to your mind, you can just do it, see if it works. So we can talk about music, we can speak on culture, tell stories. People really enjoy that type of stuff. And like you said, you can all from the comfort of your home, just talk to the world, essentially, whoever wants to listen. And I think before that was possible, like, people would just maybe have these ideas and they don't have anybody to talk to. So they would just walk around with this stuff in their head. But podcasting now gives you the ability to just put your thoughts out there. And it's really unpredictable too. I'm curious to know if you've had any experience where, I'm sure you have, where people send you messages or emails like commenting on the stuff you say in your episodes and how it changed their thought process or something like that, right?
Yeah, I do quite a lot. So I'm on YouTube, and I've got the podcast and social media and stuff, just Twitter really. And yeah, I get a lot of comments and feedback, and a variety of different things. A lot of stuff, it's just like 2-line emails, no subject. I need to learn English. Please help me. I'm like, okay. And then, some very thoughtful emails and things that I've received. Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff. I just think, I mean, not that long ago, I made an episode about an email that I received, which is an extraordinary story about a guy in Spain who had to go and have an operation, right? So the story is he needed an operation for a sleep apnea, which is basically an operation on the mouth. Routine operation, but it does require a general anesthetic. Okay. So he had the general anesthetic, he came out of it, and he sort of didn't come out of the anesthetic very well, which is a thing that can happen with general anesthetics. You can go into this weird thing where you kind of, I don't know how to describe it really, but he was delirious, and he was super paranoid, and he was hallucinating. He was convinced that he was going to die, and he was convinced that his girlfriend and all the doctors and nurses were lying to him, that he was convinced something had gone wrong, and it got worse and worse and worse, and it just became this waking nightmare that he was living in as a result of some reaction to the anesthetic. And he couldn't sleep, and it was getting worse and worse. And at one point, his girlfriend said, "Why don't you listen to that podcast that you like? It might help you." And he was like, "Oh, okay." So she started playing it to him, and it was an episode of my podcast, and the sound of my voice and just the reassuring sort of feeling that I managed to broadcast to him suddenly turned everything all right. And the kind of the paranoia, the anxiety, the delusions, it all went all nice. And he started seeing beautiful, colorful, joyful visions of his children and all this sort of stuff. He wrote all this to me in an email. He's sort of saying, thanks. So that's an extreme example, but I have had similar emails from people saying, like during lockdown and stuff, and thanks for your podcast. It's, kept me sane. And obviously emails from people saying that it's helped them with their English a lot. And it's helped them to, pass certain exams, get promotions at work and stuff. And, and a lot, I've been doing it for a long time. It'll be 14 years in a few weeks, really. So some people have been with me for ages, and I really get a sense of the long-term impact it's had for some people. Whereas as a teacher in classrooms, you might have had a similar experience where you get rolling, enrollments where people come and study with you for about 4 weeks or something, maybe an academic year, but you don't usually spend much more than like just a few weeks with each student. You do your best to help them learn English in that time, and then off they go, bye. You don't really get a sense of like the long-term impact that what you're doing has on them. But with the podcast, I've definitely had a lot more of that feeling. People are writing saying that when I started listening to you, I couldn't understand what you were saying. And then I kept listening, and, as if by magic, now I understand 90%, and I'm actually a lot more confident, and words come to me and all this sort of thing. And I just think, wow, that's amazing.
It is, man.
Yeah.
It really is amazing. 2009, you started. I'm curious to know, like, when you started, what was your intention? Like, when you sat down to hit record, you were trying to achieve what exactly?
So I just wanted to make a good podcast for learners of English. I had I didn't take it that seriously at all, but I also did. It's odd. So I thought, so I'd done more teaching qualifications, and I did a diploma in English, the Delta. So you do the CELTA, and then if you are serious about it, you do the Delta, which is kind of like a master's degree equivalent in English language teaching to adults. So I did that, and that was like, a lot more serious and really sort of thorough as a teaching qualification, like really hard work. And it really kind of like focused my mind on the job. And, at that point, I decided, right, I'm all in here. This is what I'm doing now. I'm an English teacher to adults. And once I'd made that decision, I got better and better at it, and teaching, full time for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then months and years and years and years, you start to get a sense of how to do it, And then I learned how to make a podcast, and it was easy. You can just do it on your computer, and there are certain websites where you can just you make an MP3 and you just upload it to this website, and that's it. And then you've got a podcast, and people can find it and subscribe to it really easily. And then what? And this was 2009. And so I did it, and no one else was doing it really. There were a few others. There was the BBC, BBC 6 Minute English, a popular British English podcast for learners of English. And there were a few others. There was like the ESL, English as a Second Language podcast. Who else? There were others. There were some others. But I thought, right, there's definitely a space for me here to do something. And, I wasn't doing comedy at that time. I started doing comedy later in that year, but I had lots of ideas for kind of funny stuff. I didn't know quite how to make it. I'd made some YouTube videos that just didn't go anywhere. And I thought, right, hold on a minute. So there's like millions of people around the world who want to learn English. And I'm an English teacher, and I've been doing this now for 12 years or something, however many years it was when I started doing the podcast. I can't remember, but I'm doing it for quite a long time. And I kind of feel like I know how to talk to learners of English now, and I can teach them, I can offer them something useful, and I can do it in hopefully an entertaining way. And I can just make these audios on my computer and publish them. So why won't this be a success? It was like a real revelation. I was like, how can this not be a success? I always sort of harbored a desire to be a radio DJ, but it was always a sort of a bit of a joke for me. I always kind of liked the idea of I'd love to have my own radio show. That would be cool. But I never thought about it really seriously. But I always thought, it'd be cool to be one of those DJs who's like, welcome to the radio show. You're listening to the Drive Time show. We're listening, and today we're talking about milk. I'll just say that because I've got some milk on the table. Yeah. How much milk do you have in your house today? Do you know? How much do you need? Just whatever, just talking bullshit, really. Yeah. But I liked that idea. And then here it was. The opportunity was right there, just on my computer with the internet. Yeah. And that was kind of before YouTube really took off. And so I just started doing it, and I approached it with a bit of the rigor and the sort of academic seriousness in terms of the planning that I'd learned doing the Delta, but also with a bit of my own sort of flavor of just, let's make this fun and let's make this funny. And so it was kind of just a fun project, really. And then the numbers just kept going up and up and up. And I just thought, well, I've got to keep doing this. This is fun. And there were periods at the beginning where I didn't do it for 6 months. I think I bought Red Dead Redemption on my PlayStation 3, and that just took up all my time. And I was, my laptop was over there in the evening. I was like, no, I could do a podcast, but now let's see if I can find some beavers and kill them all in order to get a special outfit. Yeah. So, yeah.
Going back to the beginning, 2009, when you were doing this, you said that the numbers just slowly started increasing. Were you promoting yourself at the time? How are people finding the show?
I don't know really, but I think they were searching iTunes for Learning English podcast, and mine would pop up.
Yeah.
I had the email addresses of lots of my students that I'd taught over the years, because I would email them sort of slides or whatever at the end of courses.
Yeah.
So I kind of sent emails to a lot of my previous students, just like polite emails, kind of saying, "Oh, I've just started this podcast. You might be interested in it." And I noticed that after I'd sent those emails out, I would see on a map. I'd see on a little map that I had, showing where my listeners were, that little red dots would pop up in places where I'd sent those emails. I was like, oh, okay, so they're actually listening. Yeah. And then, I suppose they would maybe tell some of their friends. It's like a viral kind of outbreak. There were just a few isolated cases, and then it just sort of spread a bit like I was going to say coronavirus, but that's not a very good analogy. Uh, maybe like a zombie outbreak is.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, like the fact that like 3G and 4G internet came in, there were little waves of it where there was people started to work out what podcasts were.
Mm-hmm.
Bit by bit, it kind of picked up. Also, I did some videos on YouTube in 2009, and they went viral. Something was right about at least one of those videos. I did some interviews with people in London, just asking them what's it like to live in London. Yeah. And I made sure I filmed them quite close up so their faces filled the screen. I wanted to get the faces right up close so my audience could really focus on what the people were saying. And it was, I just had one really good day of filming when I got some really nice, friendly people, some funny little interviews, and I cut it all together and uploaded it. And in those days, YouTube would choose the thumbnail for you. So you couldn't upload your own thumbnail. It would basically give you three options. Right. There was the one that was like maybe a third of the way into the video, half the way, or 25% of the way in, just whatever the screen was at that moment, half the way in and 75% of the way in. And one of these videos, the one that was like 25% was these three pretty looking English girls smiling on the front. And I think that may have been enough to like get that video clicked a lot. The title was quite, the title was good because it included lots of keywords like English speakers, London interview, learn English or something. And so that popped up and it went viral, and that probably contributed a lot. And probably people came into the show like that. Yeah. But I'm not sure really. I think it's just as people discovered podcasts and searched for learning English in their podcast app, then I was one of the shows that would show up. And I never really worked on marketing that much. I decided I'd just try and market the show by making it as good and as enthusiastic as I could make it, really, and hopefully that people would just like it and recommend it and stuff like that.
Yeah. So just like an organic thing, just slowly grew over time.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you felt like it wasn't what you should be doing? You ever think about quitting the podcast?
No.
Ever?
Seriously? No. I always, I guess they came to a point where I just thought, no, I never really thought about quitting it, except maybe those times when maybe the first couple of years where it wasn't quite as big, and I just kind of didn't feel compelled to do it, and I was distracted by Red Dead Redemption or whatever it was at the time. But no, I never really thought I'd quit because I enjoyed it too much, and I just had too many ideas that I wanted to do, and I just thought, no, I don't want to stop doing this. I still haven't done that episode about Muhammad Ali that I really want to do, or something.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. So.
I think I'm lucky as well, I have to say. I think I'm kind of lucky. There's a certain amount of privilege involved in the sense that, I had a job teaching English, and that, I had a pretty decent job in London at a good school teaching English. They gave me a permanent contract. I had my own place. And so, there was the sense of security, which then allowed me to do it. And also being, I don't know. I don't know how much of it is just like white privilege or what, but just that sense of like, I speak quite well, and so, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like people around the world, they're like, I'm learning English. I must learn English from a British man who speaks. Yeah, I must learn English from a British man who speaks English correctly, the Queen's English. And so I kind of fit the bill in that regard. But I'm always kind of I'm aware of that, and I think maybe I wonder sometimes what my listeners think, and maybe it takes them a while to work out that I don't sort of fit a kind of stereotype that they might expect. That actually I'm a bit weirder and a bit more, I don't know, a bit more strange and a bit more humorous and stuff than they think. Like I think a lot of people, when they listen to my show, wherever they are in the world, and they hear my voice, they imagine me to be someone else. They think that I look like someone else. Like I've had this lots of times. It's kind of a meme that I've got, which is that when people hear my voice, they think that I sound like maybe the guy from Downton Abbey. You know,
No, I'm
the
not sure
main
what that is.
character in Downton Abbey. Do you know that show?
I don't. Is that a
No,
British
it's a
show?
show. Huh?
Is that a British show?
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's a show about a kind of lord who lives in a big house in the countryside in England. It's a sort of upstairs, downstairs kind of thing, where upstairs you've got this aristocratic family, and they're all very posh, and you know he's an earl, and you know, lords and ladies living in a very posh house, and then downstairs there's all the staff who work down there, and it's, you know, interesting sort of drama, but so very kind of, you can imagine a guy in a tweed suit, sort of member of the royal family or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe what some people expect me to be like. You know, they imagine I'm this kind of well-spoken English gentleman, and then, you know, that's not really what I'm like. And when they actually see my face, they realize I'm actually more like Luka Modric, the football, the soccer player. Do you know him?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
People, you know, I just noticed that from comments. People are like, huh? I'm learning English from Luka Modric. I thought you looked like, you know, this is the first time I see Luke's face. He looks different than I expected, you know.
Yeah. I think people appreciate that, though. I think most English teachers, especially the ones I see online, they kind of have that sense about them. They present themselves as the traditional teacher, and I'm here to teach you, and I'm professional and whatever. But I think people appreciate the quirky, kind of unconventional characters who kind of just say what they think. They're not afraid to be themselves, especially on a podcast. I'm going to listen to you for an hour. I want to listen to you, not necessarily some, you know, polished up kind of artificial version of you. And I think when it comes to podcasting, at least what I've experienced is the more authentic you are, the more yourself that you are, the more of a loyal following you can build, and the more people kind of appreciate it. So maybe it's kind of weird for you, but I'm sure that's why people gravitate towards you, because they're learning English, but from a really just genuine, entertaining dude, you know?
Oh, that's nice. Nice of you to say that. Because sometimes I wonder, you know, I suppose, I should own it a bit more. But yeah. I mean, also part of, I do think there's, to an extent, there is a certain level of presentation, though, and first impressions are important. And I've learned that as a teacher in classrooms, that when you go into the classroom on day one, that you should probably tick certain boxes. You know, I just learned that teaching, that I should dress pretty smart on the first day. I should be kind of a bit more serious and maybe seem a little bit more strict on day one. And this is coming from, you know, experiences teaching in language schools, where at the end of, like, the one school I worked at in London, there was quite a lot of pressure on the teachers. The students were paying a lot of money. They were traveling, you know, from different countries and coming to study at this school with a good reputation, where the standards were very high. And on the morning of day 2 of their course, they'd be given a little feedback form. Are you happy with your course? Are you happy with this? And if they ticked no, then it was serious. That, you know, the manager would sort of say, what seems to be the problem? And at the end of the course, they would be given a full-on feedback form where you'd be graded, you know, on your teaching and stuff like that. And, you know, so there was quite a lot of pressure. So you learn that you've got to make the right first impression, that you've got to kind of do both, that you've got to come across as quite serious and qualified and, you know, pedagogical, but at the same time, on the other hand, you also do the, you know, quirky, enthusiastic, original kind of be myself stuff, but never do that too much, because people eventually stop taking you seriously, and they might like you, but then remember, they're paying to take an English course and they've come for a specific reason. So you've still, at the end of the day, you've got to, you know, be quite serious. So wear a jacket on day one. And if I haven't cut my hair, you know, wear nice shoes, you know, just stuff like that. So I kind of always remembered that. And that's important, that you've got to kind of put a frame around what you're doing to an extent, a kind of acceptable frame around it. And again, another thing that sort of relates to that is another example of that. I remember once at the school, there were some people came in, some publishers came in, dictionary publishers, and they had they were from, I think it was the Oxford Dictionary or Collins Dictionary, I can't remember, but they came in and they used the teachers as a focus group to ask for our opinions about some dictionary cover designs that they had, right? I don't have an example to hand, but so they asked us which ones they thought were the best, which ones we expected the students to like, which ones gave certain impressions and stuff. And we all kind of, one of the questions was, which dictionary do you think the students preferred? Which ones do you think they all said was the best? And so there were dictionaries that had different designs. One of them was like modern, fresh looking design, sort of quite informal looking. And then some others. And another one was like old fashioned with an old fashioned kind of serif font on it. You know, the sort of thing like an old fashioned dictionary font. Hold on. I don't know if this is on video, Tony.
It is, but you're good. Don't worry about it.
Okay, there's audio people listening as well, probably, who can't
he's
see this.
He's grabbing his dictionaries at the moment.
I've got a couple of dictionaries here. So the one, the blue one here is the Longman Language Activator. It's kind of got like a Helvetica font, just blue, bright yellow, red. This is a really good dictionary. The other one here is a Penguin English Dictionary, black or dark color, a more old-fashioned looking font on it.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of thought this one might be the more popular one because it seems very sort of, what's the word for it? Clear and modern.
Exactly. It's vibrant,
right?
Yeah.
Vibrant, clear and modern and so on. But the students all went for like the dark, serious, old-fashioned looking dictionary, yeah. Which I was surprised at too. And it just made me think, this is interesting. So our learners of English, they think of this as being like a serious academic sort of thing that they're doing. And they want the history. They want the kind of the gravitas, So I don't know. That's something as well. Like my logo is kind of a mix of the two things. It's kind of a bit modern, but it's also got a bit of a traditional look to it as well. It looks a bit like a London street sign.
It does. I'm looking at it right now over there in the corner. It's nice, man.
Yeah.
Did you make that yourself?
My brother did that. He's a graphic designer.
That's nice.
I'm opening the window here because I'm actually kind of warm. Yeah.
But speaking of that specifically, those examples you gave, I'm curious to know what's your methodology or your style in the classroom when it comes to teaching, because some teachers will take the approach where it's like, here's the lesson for today, and here are these words, repeat after me, and class is over. And then there are others, kind of like myself, which is much more of a conversational approach to where I'm going to speak to you more or less the way I would speak to anybody from my country. And we're just going to have conversations about certain topics. I'm going to correct you along the way, help you express yourself in more detail and things like that. So what's your approach?
Sort of a bit of both. I think that I do the conversational thing where I try to be sensitive to the students and try to listen to them and try and pay attention to them and stuff. But also I try to be like a kind of maybe an old traditional teacher as well, in the sense that I will, sometimes I'll be at the board and I'll teach them and I'll kind of tell them what to do and say, right, repeat after me, so I like to mix it up and try and do both. It's a bit exhausting, but it's a combination of the two. But I think probably my students would say I was more like you. Mm-hmm. I'm probably kind of funny and approachable and conversational and relaxed and stuff. But in the back of my mind, I've always got that voice going, no, you need to be doing this properly. Mm-hmm. You need to be doing this seriously. I remember some of my first experiences teaching in London, I would be drawn to the funny, relaxed approach, and my students would respond to it. And then I'd be getting stressed, going, no, but I need to be I need to be a serious teacher. I remember saying that to my students and they would all laugh. They'd laugh at me going, and repeat it back to me and say, oh, he always says he needs to be serious. Like, going for a drink with some of my students, if they met my brother or something, they'd say, oh, Luke's very funny. Sometimes in the lesson, he just says, but I should be a serious teacher. So I don't know, Tony. I don't know, really. I haven't got it all worked out. I just sort of like try and do the best of both worlds all the time. And
how long was it after you started your podcast that you found a sustainable way to monetize? Because before we did this recording, you mentioned that you struggle with the idea of free content and paid content. I made an episode about that as well. So when did that start for you, and when did you even get the idea to monetize?
Yeah, I guess it must have been about maybe. I think I always knew at the beginning that was a possibility, but the infrastructure wasn't there at the start,
right?
Except for PayPal donations. But there wasn't really like the same infrastructure that there is now. Everything's kind of monetizable in lots of different ways. You've got Patreon and automatic ads and online courses and stuff. So I didn't know at the beginning. I kind of just vaguely thought, I'll keep doing this, and if I do it well enough, someone will notice me and they'll just give me loads of money. Or I thought this might lead to something else. It might lead to a job at the BBC or whatever, But then I don't know how, but I kind of worked out that you could do affiliate advertising and stuff. My very first thing was Audible. I think they got in touch with me. Not that it was Audible, but some other company that was managing affiliate partnerships with Audible. I think they contacted me, or I heard so many podcasts where Audible were sponsoring them. I just thought, what's going on here? How do we do this? So I looked it up, and I found one of these companies, and I sort of wrote them an email and said, how would I get sponsored by Audible? And they wrote back and said, okay, this is how you do it. You have to apply for the affiliate program and blah, blah, blah. So I did that. And then I realized, oh, wait, they sent me like an affiliate link, audibletrial.com/teacher Luke.
Yeah.
And they said, for every new subscription to Audible that goes through this link, you'll get $15. I was like,
shit.
Yeah, that was in 2000 God, when was that? 2015, maybe? That's
wow.
that. I mean, it's not that anymore. There's no way you get $15 per subscription anymore. I mean, it's amazing. Amazing that. So I was like, what? Really? So, and then in my head, I was like, blip, 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 doing the maths in my brain. I was thinking, wait a minute. So I could make some money. Any money for me at that point was like great. Like, brilliant. Wow. $15. And so, I thought, right, I just need to try and encourage people to sign up to Audible. And there was that reluctance as well of like, oh, I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to like start selling out, man. But then I thought, it's all right.
Got over that real quick. Like, no, rent you on the first. Put that link in the description one time,
Yeah, but then I thought, well, if I can sort of advertise Audible in an entertaining kind of way, then I think it's okay. And I think that my audience will understand that, I'm not just doing this for free. There's got to be some financial incentive. Otherwise, what's going to happen? I'll end up spending all my time on this, and then my wife will get really upset with me because I'm not bringing any money home, and then she'll leave me, and then it'll be Luke's depressed English podcast. And that's no good. So anyway, so I did that, and then other sponsorship things turned up. Like I noticed that there were more and more YouTubers doing English teaching who were like ridiculously successful, like people like English with Lucy, for example, who appeared, I don't know when, I can't remember now, but she appeared and sort of poof, her views skyrocketed. And I noticed that every now and then she or maybe some other people were sponsored by a online teaching platform. I thought, hello, hi, maybe you want to sponsor me too. So I think I wrote to them and said, oh, how do I, sort out sponsorship with you guys? And they wrote back to me, and we had an arrangement, and I probably negotiated badly and didn't get as much money per sponsorship promo as I could have done, but I was fine with it. And I, mentioned them at the beginning of every episode, and that actually brought me, a sort of approaching a wage, and really it's just the business grew up around me. So really the thing was to try and get my numbers up to a certain level, and to focus on that. It was always I just have to try and make the content good. And then once you build the house, once you kind of build the thing, you can then start, I don't know, this metaphor is no good. You build a house and then you can sort of slap advertising on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm not the best business-minded person, actually. So I'm not necessarily the right person to talk to about monetization, but sponsorship with an online teaching company, and then the option when I moved to Libsyn, the podcast host, I noticed that they had the option to create your own premium subscription, and they also would develop an app for you. And then I saw, right, this is an opportunity, because I knew that really to make money from what I was doing, I would just need to capitalize on my audience in some way, and that what I should do is build an online course, and then you kind of funnel people towards your online course, right? It's evergreen content. But I just couldn't get my head around this, and I couldn't just manage it. I wasn't organized or entrepreneurial enough to build the course, build the online platform, build the landing page, the email list, I'm just like, I just want to make an episode about, like
toilets
zombies
and Chinese TikTok and shit like that.
Yeah, I want to talk about toilets with my friends for 45 minutes and then just publish that, please. So I wrote loads of material. I was going to write a whole online course, and I wrote a lot of it and spent a year trying to work on it. It just wasn't working out for me. So I thought, right, I just need to do something. So I'm going to do this other idea, which is to use the Libsyn premium subscription, create my own app, and then use that as the platform where I'm going to basically produce sort of bonus episodes that people pay for. And so I just went for that. And I did that, and that was like my version of Patreon. I could have done Patreon, but I wanted people to be able to listen to my bonus episodes on their mobile phone in the convenient way. I didn't realize that Patreon does issue RSS feeds for podcasts. I think maybe when I was doing it, that wasn't quite clear. Anyway, that's not what I chose to do. So I essentially did a Patreon style model, and that worked well. It's a bit exhausting though, the monthly bonus content option, because you've got to produce it, and you're tied in to making stuff every month. It's like, oh god. So it's a good thing I enjoy doing it. If I didn't, then I'm not sure it would work. I've always tried to build it around doing something I like doing. That's kind of like part of my business model, is to ensure that I can do what I like doing. Rather than chasing the dollar all the time and then just tripping up and falling flat on your face as the dollar sort of like keeps going, and you're like, Instead, I'm just like, no, I'll make the dollar a cup of tea, sit down with it. Would you like a biscuit? That sort of thing.
But let's go back to the first one. You said Audible was like your first sponsor or affiliate program that you got involved in. Do you remember the actual conversation or negotiation, like how you approached them and what the requirements were to qualify and stuff like that?
I just Googled it, and then I think I found like a page for Audible affiliates, something like that. And there was an application process on the website. I didn't negotiate anything. I just applied for it. And they said, okay, here are the terms. And I went, cool, click. That was kind of it, really. Now I'll start doing my stuff. and I'll promote it, and I created a different URL. It
Mhm.
rerouted it through my website, so it wasn't
Right.
audibletrial.com slash. It was like my website URL slash Audible,
Right.
and that made a difference. It made it easier for me to say it. People could remember it
Mhm.
more easily, and that brought some money in. So it was just that applying for it. The landscape, the business landscape changes. I don't know if it would be as easy to get that these days, and with so much content out there, the terms might be different. The general
Yeah.
terms, it's probably harder to get. Like, as I said, $15. That's probably like changed now. I don't know why or how. Um, so there's that. But at the beginning, monetization was a stream. It was just like a trickle of money
Mm.
here, a trickle of money here, a trickle of money here. And I just thought I'll just sort of like get all these little trickles going, and it will slowly, fill this pot. And then I just some of those trickles became a bit um, more fruitful.
Mhm.
Not that a trickle can be fruitful, but those trickles turned into um, bigger streams.
Streams? Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Are
Was
you?
it the same for iTalk? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, are you looking at? Well, you must be looking at ways of monetizing as well
Yeah,
going
definitely. I
forwards.
mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
from the beginning, I never really even thought it was possible to monetize a podcast. I started at the end of 2018, and I was just doing it just because I wanted to do it. And it's immediately when I started, I was like, man, this is fun, bro. Like, cause I don't necessarily like being on camera, talking to a camera as if it's a person. So YouTube never really was my kind of thing. It always felt really awkward. So when I figured out, oh, I can just turn on the mic and just talk, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I was doing
Mm,
it for fun at first. And then I can't remember what it was when I even found out about monetization. I really don't remember, but I just knew once I decided I wanted to find a way to monetize, I didn't want to run ads because just I hate listening to ads, especially ones that have nothing to do with me. And I understand for the producer, they need to make their money. So whatever. But personally, I just didn't want to put ads on my show. And I didn't really have that many listeners at the time anyway. So how am I going to even secure an ad spot? So I just went for a couple of years just doing it. And it was just like, we'll see what happens. And then Patreon came along. And I thought about that for a while, but people were getting canceled on Patreon, getting deplatformed and stuff for things that they were saying, like Sargon of Akkad and people like that. And I was like, I don't really want to build a house on that foundation,
yeah.
knowing that just pull the rug out from under me at any time. So I just kept doing my thing. And oddly enough, man, I was doing research for an episode about connected speech, and this blog article came up, and it was from an English teacher's website or a podcast for learners of English. And then I was just me being curious. I started looking at the rest of their website, and he had a membership, which is basically like we do 2 episodes a week. One is free. And if you sign up for the membership, you get the bonus episode. And I was like, yo, this is what I've been looking for. This is amazing. So I emailed the dude and asked him, like, hey, how'd you do this? I want to do something like really similar. I also have a podcast. And he didn't want to tell me how he did it. And I was like, all right. That's fine. So I basically reverse engineered his website to build my own, just figuring out all the technology that he used. And then I set
Clever.
up my stuff in 2021, and I think like October or something. And in the first month, it was like profitable. Was covering all my expenses, and I had just a little bit of money to put in my pocket at the end.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to see how big I can grow this and just keep reinvesting the money to grow it bigger and
Yes.
bigger. But the problem was I couldn't find a way to get enough people to it and then actually sign up for it. I just didn't really understand where the value was and what I was doing, because in my mind, I didn't want to just ask for donations, because I just knew 98% of people, you ask for donations every episode, they're not going to fucking donate, especially when you're
Mm,
just giving it away for free. So I was like, how can I build a business around this thing? Well, people can understand the majority of what I say, but when I have guests on or I use other content, it gets more difficult. So I'll give them transcripts, a vocabulary guide explaining the more difficult stuff. We added some cool features on the website, like captions and all these cool things. And I thought that was going to be the business. Like, it's not just donate to me and I want money, but let me give you some extra value in exchange for the membership. and just it never really took off, man. I was promoting myself on multiple social media platforms and just constantly trying to put more and more episodes out. And no matter, it seems like kind of like you, I'm not really an entrepreneur. I have entrepreneurial tendencies, but I'm not a fucking businessman. I'm a creator. I just want to create stuff. So I never really figured out why we couldn't get this scale in terms of users. You know what I mean? And so it never really got to the point where it was like super monetizable. And it kind of got, like you mentioned earlier, you're doing this for so much time of your day and your week, and it's not really going anywhere. You enjoy doing the podcast, but like rent is due on the 1st, and like
Yeah.
a bunch of other stuff I want to do with my life. And these people know what I'm trying to do, but they're not signing up for the membership. So I just got it in my head, like maybe this isn't as valuable as I think it is. And that's kind of when I decided to pivot. I'm just going to do the podcast in a way where I don't care if it makes money or not, which is what we're doing right now, and kind of just let that whole idea of monetizing the English teaching thing, I just kind of left it to the side, because it was, again, I would write all my episodes. I would be working with my VA to manage the website, making videos on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I had 2 jobs aside from that, and I have a personal life. It's just I couldn't sustain that level of production. I was just like, yeah, this isn't really going anywhere. So I don't want to stop podcasting because I genuinely love it. So let me just do it in a different way. And if at some point in the future it makes money, then great. But at this point, I don't care, because, I mean, again, asking for the donations, most people aren't going to donate. And I don't understand really how to build a business in any other way around a podcast like this. So it's like, you know what, let's just try to make a great show and we'll go from there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, I feel kind of lucky in the sense that I started ages ago, because really, it's about just ratios or leveraging, you know, and, you know, you're only going to get a tiny percentage of your audience either buying something, paying for something, sending you a donation, or basically entering their card details into something. You know, it's only going to be a tiny portion.
Right.
I mean, I will like tell my listeners, okay, check this thing out. Here's the link. It's in the description. Check this thing out. And it's just like a free thing. Or even like, oh, I had a conversation with, you know, Tony on his podcast. The link is in the description. So that basically there's a whole other episode for you, a whole other conversation that you could listen to. If you like listening to me having conversations with people, there it is. How many people actually click the link and listen to the thing?
Yeah.
It's a tiny little portion. I mean, some will, but it's a small percentage. And then the percentage of those people who actually then will pay for it. So you're really dividing and subdividing and dividing and dividing again. And so really the only, like, maybe the elephant in the room kind of thing whenever this conversation happens about monetizing a podcast is you've got to get your audience to a certain level. Absolutely. And then, you know, then that portion, that small percentage, that freaking 2% or maybe 10%, if you're really good at the sales stuff, if you've got all the patter and the rest of it all engaged, and if you've got like a good web funnel, you know, an email funnel and all that stuff sorted out. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, of course. I've been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah, you've done it. You know, I hate all that stuff.
Me too, man. It's the worst, bro. It's the worst.
Thing is, though, you'll maybe in 3 years, you'll see me going, I love email funnels, when I'm like, you know, drinking champagne in the south of France. But yeah, that. So it's, you know, ultimately it's about building an audience, and then once you've got an audience in place, once you've got that foundation, then you can start to do something. But so I'm lucky in the sense that I didn't have to really, maybe I didn't have to worry so much about that, because in the first 5, 6, or first maybe even 10 years, or less, 5 years or something, that whole monetization thing didn't even really exist. And so it was just like, instead I was kind of dreaming of going, oh, I'd love to be able to just keep doing this. I want to be able to do this. Imagine if that was possible. And these days it is, and lots of people are now starting podcasts, you know, expecting to be able to monetize it, but it's, you know, you've got to wait. You've got to put a lot more of a time and effort and enthusiasm and passion investment into it before you can start getting the returns. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's like kind of going back to that conversation we had earlier about when you're a teenager and you're kind of at the beginning of your life, and you think, I need to go down a certain path that's going to lead me in the right direction, where I can buy a house and and provide for a family and stuff.
Right.
But it's a real risk, and to just sort of do the thing that you just like doing, and just hope that will kind of lead to something fruitful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tricky one, but I mean, I like the show. I listened to the one that you did about the one with the Sam Harris clip at the beginning.
Cost, price, and value. Yeah.
Yeah, cost, price, and value. Yeah, very good. It got me thinking. Definitely got
Yeah,
me
that was,
thinking about the subject.
it's funny you say that because I did that episode probably around the time that I was having that dilemma in my head. I'm like, man, like, should I just keep working on it and just like persist and keep going, build the audience bigger and bigger? And then I heard that clip somewhere on YouTube, and it just kind of reinforced the idea in my brain. I'm like, you really have to be clear in your mind about what value actually is and what value you're providing to somebody when you're asking them for money. And kind of like you just said, I think a lot of us make the mistake of believing that it's as easy as it looks on the screen when we see other people doing it. Man, Joe Rogan's got a podcast and he's making who knows how much money, or Luke's got a podcast and a premium subscription, and these people are making money doing this. I could do that. Let me set up my website and my email funnels and my logo and blah. Listen to my podcast and support if you want. And people just don't realize, kind of like you said, you have to have a substantial audience on your hands that's actually engaged before they even think about supporting your show. Like, you need to give them a real reason to support it, because there's so much free content out there, especially today. You're competing with literally everybody else on the internet who wants these people's attention. And you're not only asking them for their attention, but also their money, you know? So it's just, I think personally, I tried to monetize a bit too early. And if I was speaking to any other potential podcasters right now, I would say, man, just assume you're not going to make money for the first 10 years. And then ask yourself, do you really want to do this? Because money shouldn't even be the objective. Obviously, you want to do this for a living. But when it comes to creative work, man, it really is like trying to make it in the NBA or the Premier League or something like that. Everybody wants to do this. So you really think you're just that good that episode 1, you're going to be a millionaire off this? It's just not going to work, bro. So I think we all kind of need to think much more deeply about what it costs to do this, what price people are willing to pay for it, and what value are we actually giving to these people. Because we may think our show is the shit, but a lot of people, like you said, maybe 98 or 90% of your audience is just kind of like, I like it, but if it disappears tomorrow, I'll find something else to listen to. And I think a lot of podcasters don't want to hear that about their own show. You know what I mean? So monetization is a really tricky one.
Yeah. And especially now, the market is quite saturated. There's like millions of podcasts.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought, Tony, that Life in English is still a good sort of potentially a good idea. Or I mean, I don't want to. Now you've made your decision now, but like I think it's important to have an edge or an angle. And I think maybe and a potential audience, and you've got to stand out a little bit. So doing interview show it's great, and it's clearly something you really want to do. But I don't know if I still think maybe there's some value in sticking with the kind of targeting learners of English with what you're doing, because that's a large market. But what do I know?
Well, you know a lot, man. I mean, you're one of the pioneers of this stuff, man. So I would say you're definitely onto something. And to this day, I kind of think about it, because I was confident in my decision to kind of pivot, just because by trying to monetize something I genuinely was just passionate about, I slowly started to lose passion for it, because then it became like I'm trying to manage and build a business over here when all I want to do is make the podcast. And then, like you said, when you have the premium subscription and you're doing bonus episodes and everything, you just feel the need to just be producing just to produce. And I'm writing all my episodes and trying to put like energy and thought into them and make sure they're good. And you can't rush that kind of thing. And people were never complaining about the volume of episodes, but just subconsciously, I'm like, no, I need to be producing, man. These people are paying me good money to do this. So then it got to the point where I'm even stressed just sitting down to fucking write an episode. I'm like, man, this is not what this is supposed to be, bro. I'm supposed to be enjoying this part. This is what I want to do. You know what I mean?
I know exactly how you feel. I have all those feelings too.
Really?
But also, on the other hand, I mean, I don't believe in horoscopes and stuff. I don't believe in star signs, but sometimes they're quite a good method of explaining like
Mm,
personality or something. I'm a Gemini, so I'm always in two minds about everything. And that's kind of come through maybe in this conversation, that I'm always got
interesting.
like two things going on at the same time. Where
Yeah.
on one hand, I sort of think, yeah, we should just sort of follow our heart, do the thing we enjoy doing. You know, Confucius said that the person who chooses the job they love never works a day in their life.
Yeah.
Uh, and all that stuff. Follow your passion and just follow your dreams and just do what you enjoy doing. But then on the other hand, there is something to be said for the value of like the discipline and the hard work and just getting down to it, and that sort of work ethic as well. And I think that maybe the best thing is when you combine those two things, and you, in the difficult times when you're not inspired, you just fall back on that work ethic, and you just kind of like, keep plugging away, and you just keep
Mhm.
going, and you're exhausted and you're like, oh fuck this. But then, and you do 10 minutes and you're like, oh, that's it. But then you do something else, and then you I'll go do 10 more minutes. And you got to use those methods to keep pressing on. Like, just
Mhm.
have a little clock on the desk. 10 minutes of work, go click. 10 minutes,
Right.
right? 10 minutes are up. Okay, do something else for 20 minutes, and then sort of 10 more minutes or something. So a bit of self-discipline
Yeah.
can help as well. So it's not just let's just do what I enjoy doing, but I think
Agreed.
you got to kind of like the carrot and the stick.
Mhm.
You got to do both.
Yeah, 100%, man. 100%. So I think there's definitely validity to it. Sometimes I think like kind of like you said, especially today when we're just inundated with so many different podcasts, and it's really hard to get people's attention because I don't know about you, but like when it comes to podcasts specifically, there's maybe 4 or 5 that you'll listen to regularly. And if somebody mentions a new one, it's like, I'll get to it eventually. You know what I mean? So to convince somebody to put you in their weekly lineup is not as easy as it was in the past. So I was thinking like, man, my friend Mateos, he actually convinced me to use my existing audience and just keep doing the same thing, but just do more of a different format like we're doing right now. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to start fresh because it has nothing to do with people learning English as a foreign language. But then I was like, starting from zero today makes absolutely no sense when you spent the past, what, 4 or 5 years building up this audience. And even if just a small percentage are the ones that truly follow and listen to every episode, that's a lot more than zero. These people
Yeah,
know you, they love your content. So that's when I decided I'm just going to keep using the same lane I've built and just do it in a format where I don't care if it's making money. I still enjoy every second of it. But then I'm like, okay, there still was, and I think there still is a huge space in the ESL sphere or industry for people who, with a podcast like yours or like mine, who kind of do it in a more quirky, authentic way. And people like that. But it's just like, it really is just a question of how much time can I dedicate to it.
mm.
And when it comes to the way I used to do it, that time has drastically decreased. And it seems like, understandably, the majority of people either can't or won't support it financially. So it's just like, I mean, how am I going to sustain doing this with just the hope one day that doing it this way is going to be monetizable? That doesn't make sense because then I'm only doing it with that in mind. And that's fucking dumb. So I just figured I'll do it this way. And part of me thinks I'll still maybe do some kind of like sub show where I focus much more on the monologues and I do it in the traditional way that I've always done it. But I don't know. I'm still thinking about it, man, because
Why
when
can't you do
money,
both? Because I do that. I have interview episodes where I
yeah,
have
that's what I mean. Is I'm thinking about doing both on the
yeah
same show and just kind of
yeah
doing it that way without really worrying about the volume I'm putting out or anything like that. And maybe just put a link, and if people want to support, they can. I feel like that's the most organic, low pressure way where I can just do my thing. And if you want to support, you can, because I tried to build a business around it, not just with the transcripts and vocabulary guys and all that, but by talking to so many English students over the years, they would all complain about the same thing. We have no one to talk to. So I was like, okay, nobody seems to be solving this problem. And I think I know why. A lot of English teachers, it's hard to scale yourself, right? You might do a one on one class with somebody, but all of these people, you can't talk to all of them at the same time.
yeah
So there's no business there. So I'll sell a course. And that's what a lot of teachers do, because you make it once and you can sell it a million times if you want. But I've always had an issue with that just because you're not going to be fluent in a language by taking an online course. You're going to become fluent by talking to real people by living your life in English. That's where the name of the podcast came from.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, nobody's solving this problem. It seems obvious to me. I'll create a Discord server where everybody can come and we can talk. I'll host group events. I'll find a way to bring other natives on. And I worked as hard as I could at that for like a year. And what I realized is even the people who complain about it all the time, I need people to speak with, I want to practice, blah, blah, blah. You can open it up for free. I experimented with different price points and everything for the membership, gave it away for free at one point. People would join for free and just never show up or interact or make an effort. I'm like, man, fuck this, bro. I'm putting in all this effort. People clearly don't want this. So there's no business here and people aren't just going to donate. So I don't really see how this is sustainable, you know? So I'm always just kind of stuck in between them because I don't care about money, bro. All I care about is what I can do with it to grow the show, pay my bills, and just do this full time. But maybe I was bad at communicating that and people didn't understand. I don't know, man. I still haven't figured out what exactly went wrong or which things went wrong in that path to trying to monetize, you know?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a bit like the kind of, an analogy like, scooping fish out of the water with a net, um, unfortunately, the nets that we use is often there are quite a lot of holes in it, and loads of the fish come out. You're left with a few flapping around that you've still got, or other analogies like that. Yeah, I don't know, Tony, really. I don't really know. All I've ever done is, most of what I've done is focus on making sure that my content is as good as it can be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I succeed in that. That's like a subjective thing. It depends on people's opinion, But I've always tried to just, make it as good as possible, make it the audio sound good, really sort of do the best I can in each episode, and use my experience and stuff as much as possible and make it entertaining. And try to build the audience. That's the foundation. Is just investing in the show and investing time and energy. And I guess maybe because it's 14 years old now, and so after a while you develop a certain core audience, and that helps the podcast to grow as well, and you become established and all that sort of thing. But small beginnings. Everything starts small. For me, many years in the wilderness, so to speak. Really, where I was just experimenting with episodes. If you kind of look in my archive, there's some quite weird stuff in there. But as I said before, like about presenting, wearing the nice jacket and the good shoes on day one, it's the same thing with episodes. I can do a weird episode where it's, for example, a made up story where I'm just improvising a story or something else, but always remembering to present it in a slightly more respectable way. To say at the beginning, today I'm going to tell you a nonsense story, or not even say it's a nonsense story. Today I'm going to tell you a story, and the idea is that you just have to follow the story and notice like all the phrasal verbs that I'm using in it. And then I'll say, I don't know what the story is going to be. I'm going to just make it up as we go along. I hope you find it interesting. Are you ready? I'll test you at the end. Let's go. And then some nonsense but I'm using the phrasal verbs, and then at the end it's like, so did you notice the phrasal verbs? Here they were, and I'd make that, have a lot of fun, be kind of enjoying it maybe a bit too much, thinking, oh God, I wonder what they're going to think, and hoping, fingers crossed, like I hope just someone laughs at this. I hope someone is on a bus listening to this in flipping Romania or something, just sniggering to themselves. I hope someone finds this funny. And I put a lot of episodes like that out. A lot of episodes where, I know that I'm being funny, but I'm just thinking, I just wonder if anyone's going to get it. And then even now, really, I feel like only in the last few years, like people have sort of started to pick up on the fact that, oh, okay, it's kind of funny podcast for learners of English. It's only fairly recently. Really? And I was kind of like, oh yeah, where were you 8 years ago? So time, a lot of it's time, but I feel a certain amount of privilege in the fact that I got there kind of early. So I put the time in sort of early on, which puts me at an advantage now, So yeah, I don't know. Get the balance right. A balance of like having fun, enjoying it, but also being kind of shrewd about it at the same time. But don't burn yourself out, just maybe take 3 months off and play Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, man, it's a challenge. To be honest, I figured at this point, maybe not Red Dead Redemption, but I definitely just decided I'm going to take a few months to really not think too deeply about it, because I think when you look back and you try to make sense of things, it's kind of easy to tell yourself stories about the way things were and the way things weren't. So I'd rather just kind of like distance myself from it for a bit and just do what I enjoy doing, and figure out what I want to do in the future. Because, like I said, I'm still flirting with the idea of doing it the old way and the new way, just on the same podcast. I mean, there's nothing stopping me from doing that. But yeah, we'll see what happens, man. All I know is that, like, no matter what you're doing, if you bring money into the equation, it's no longer just I'm doing this because I enjoy it. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
I want to get back to the place where I'm literally just doing it just because I enjoy it, and then we'll figure out the rest later. But one thing I wanted to ask you after listening to you speak was, if you had to start today, do you think you would still start a podcast?
Whoa. That would be so hard to start today, because even now I look around and look at other podcasts and YouTube channels, and I kind of think I already kind of feel like, oh, everyone's doing so much better than me, is kind of how I feel. I know I'm there with like 100 million downloads, to my name, but I look around at YouTube and I see just every day I'll just randomly go on YouTube, and I might search for something on YouTube, like learn English, something on YouTube, but a lot of the time things just will pop up. And it's just like, wow, another channel on YouTube that I'd never seen before with someone teaching English. And my God, look at the number of subscribers, like millions of subscribers. And I just sort of think, oh my God. So sorry, that's not really the helpful answer that you were looking for. If I was to start today, that's such a hard question. That is so hard, because that's like cancelling out the last 14 years of my life, and having to try and think of. I don't know. I don't know. I think that probably I really can't imagine. That's a real lack of imagination on my part there, that I can't picture my life today without my podcast, without having been doing my podcast for the last 14 years.
Wow.
I don't know if I would do TikTok. I think I'd probably make YouTube videos. I'd probably make a YouTube channel. But the problem with that is that, as you said, you end up building your house on a platform that could rug you. I'd probably find ways to build an email list, Tony. The email list is the thing you own. So start like an email list. Okay. And in your podcast episodes, invite people to join the email list in order to get some free stuff, like a PDF or the transcripts or whatever. But collect emails, because that's something you actually own. And that's direct contact you would have with, an audience or potential clients of some kind. Once you've got an email list, like people say that email is actually the most valuable tool for monetization. So try and build an email list. Call it a client list if you like, but an email list, and then and then work on the email funnel. Sorry, I said the dirty word.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's probably the most and that's probably the safest thing to do.
But it is interesting because, like, the landscape is completely different today, and I don't know if I would recommend that somebody start a podcast today, because I think most people don't start podcasts for the right reasons. And obviously this is just my opinion, but I just get the sense a lot of people are more interested in the money and fame aspect, or potential money and fame aspect of a podcast, more so than just, I have something to say and I'm going to hit record and say it. Obviously there are a lot of people out there like that, but I would, like I said earlier in the episode, I would say just really think deeply. If you never made $1, would you still dedicate all this time to it? If the answer is no, you should probably find something else to do. Or, I mean, give it a try or whatever, but just make sure your intentions are good, because it takes a long time to build first of all, figure out what you do, how you do it, and what style is comfortable for you. That takes time and experimentation, then developing an audience. And that piece right there, I think, is the most challenging part. It's just developing a core audience that sticks with you, because again, there's just so many options out there for calling for people's attention. You know what I mean? So it's really, really hard, I think, to develop something good and grow without
And
promoting yourself on other channels at the same time.
and keep your head screwed on. And you do have your head screwed on. I mean, not just physically. I mean, your head is attached to your body, thank goodness. But I mean, sort of, in terms of the way you're thinking about it all, obviously. And, maintain that perspective, because, we are being manipulated and sort of played and gamed all the time by everything, especially now with like different online platforms where, they sort of draw you in, like, platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. They're like, spend all of your time making content for this channel for the likes. And it's like, what? We're being manipulated into doing all that stuff all the time. And sometimes, so yeah, maybe if I was starting from scratch now, maybe I would, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just focus on the simple things in life instead, and just the wholesome things. Maybe I would just be, I don't know. I mean, these days I've got a child, and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know. Sometimes I kind of feel like, it would be nice to just spend an afternoon sitting in a chair reading a good book. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a lovely, wholesome thing to do. Just feed your brain, feed your mind, just meditate, for an hour, and just the goodness that can bring you, but we've got to pay the bills.
Yeah, the pull of TikTok is much stronger, I think, these days for a lot of people. There's nobody sitting down reading fucking books, man.
Oh, there must be still.
Yeah, of course there are. Yeah, I'm joking, but I'm curious to know, why aren't you on other social media platforms, kind of promoting yourself, letting more people know about the show?
Just not enough hours in the day, and Instagram. Just I don't know. I don't know. I've never done it, and it's just like there's just aren't enough hours left in each day.
Yeah.
It's like moments like this when it's like, oh yeah, I really should do Instagram, and then it's like I've got 15 minutes left before I need to go home because my daughter will be back. And it just isn't enough time or energy, so you can't do everything. I don't want to spread myself too thin. And TikTok is, it's just like completely opposite of what I do. It's like the polar opposite of my podcast. And I'm not so sure about it either.
You're suspicious of the TikTok.
It's a bit insidious, isn't it?
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's version of it is different too, right? Everyone's seeing different stuff on the For You page. And a lot of people believe that it's kind of like a Chinese spy weapon kind of thing, and they're collecting all the data. And what are they going to do with all this data and surveillance that they're performing on us and stuff? A lot of people are worried about that.
Yeah, I can totally understand. Yeah,
but what I don't understand is why people are terrified of TikTok as a Chinese spy app, when the great people of the United States of America are willfully being spied on by their own governments and tech companies. Google, Facebook, Instagram, like all these companies do the same shit. So I'm just confused as to why people are suspicious of TikTok. I suspect that people aren't worried about their privacy. I suspect that this is propaganda, and that maybe the tech companies are mad that TikTok is so good. So we have to find a way to take TikTok down. What better way than to convince them they're being spied on by America's #1 enemy, when right here in San Francisco, they're doing the same shit. They're doing the same thing.
Everyone's like rushing, falling over themselves to sign up to ChatGPT or whatever it was. Like, what was that one that came out like a couple of years ago? That's like a form of like podcasting where you're all talking in a group. What was it called? I can't remember now. But there was a huge craze for it that lasted about 3 months. And no one's talking about it at all anymore. It's a kind of platform where people can have these big conversations, which are live conversations. No, if we had this conversation during that month when everyone was mad about it, you'd be like instantly telling me what it was.
Damn, now I'm curious.
Would Clubhouse or something?
Clubhouse. Yeah,
Clubhouse.
that's what it was. Yeah, that did kinda just explode and then
Yeah,
disappear off
they
into the
just
darkness real
they
quick.
just hoovered up all of our email addresses and phone numbers. You had to put your phone number in that to
Okay.
sign up for it. I was signing up for it. It's like phone number. Nah.
Mm,
Even though if they've got your email address, if you just
yeah,
accept a cookie, then they're
right.
basically in. But so yeah, I don't know. A lot of it's just getting into deep territory now, where
Yeah,
basically we're just they're just farming us for data, which and all knowledge is power, as we know, and like everything is now we're just we're the product, we're not the users, we're the
yeah,
actual the end, we're the product that's being sold from this company to this company.
yeah, man.
Yeah, it's shady, very shady business. Um,
Say
but
the least.
maybe people just feel like, oh well, I'm happy to be spied on by my own government because
At
I don't
least
know.
I know them. Like, at
Yeah, but
least
like
there's
another
someone.
government from another country over there. Nah, no.
Yeah,
It's all very interesting the psychology
it's strange,
of it
man.
all.
I don't think it's sustainable either, man. I was just talking to a friend about this last night where short form content is exploding. TikTok has just gone into the stratosphere, and you see all the other platforms kind of copying the TikTok style with
Yeah,
shorts, reels, and stuff like that. But to be honest, man, I don't think people over the long term will prefer such empty, short, quick, in your face kind of content that doesn't really have much substance and it's here and then it's gone. And you watch 50 videos in 30 minutes. You don't remember anything you just watched. You're not processing that information. I don't think people are going to prefer that long term. I think it's making people kind of sad and depressed. And I think, although I probably would caution somebody against starting a podcast or a long form YouTube channel, I would say if you're in it for the long term, that's a much better place to be because people are going to want substance. I think that's why I like the Joe Rogan Experience and other shows like that continue to grow and grow because they want to hear people have intelligent conversations about interesting things, not just fucking I see murder, I see porn, I see like people getting beat up, I see all types of nonsense. Whenever I scroll on TikTok, I'm like, man, this is you can't sustain this, bro. This is having an effect on all of our brains. It's
yeah,
not good, you know?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, man. What are we gonna do?
I don't know, no idea. Yeah, that's why I'm not on TikTok.
That's a good way to wrap it up, man. Luke, I really want to thank you, man, for coming on the show. It's been great. Really
Thanks for
appreciate it.
inviting me. Really, thank you for choosing to invite me. That's nice of you. And good luck with everything.
Thank you,
Really,
man.
yeah. I enjoyed
Yeah,
being on the show. Good conversation.
it was great, man. So if people want to check you out, they can find you Luke's English podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the logos on the screen. You're on Twitter as well, right?
I'm on Twitter at English Podcast.
At English Podcast. Perfect. Well, I'm sure you're gonna get some people checking you out, man. But it was great. So let me go ahead and